Hi everybody, it's Nikki here and welcome to a bookish video. So today's video is going to be my March reading wrap up, which is where I talk about all the books that I read in March. Now, I will tell you all my statistics when we get to the end of the video because some of them are spoilers because of the way that I'm taking my statistics this year. So let's get straight in to the first book that I read in March. So the first book that I read was my Mills and Boon, and that was Disgrace and Desire by Sarah Mallory. My notes for this say, a woman willing to have a ruined reputation in favour of saving the one she loved, and a man willing to do anything to save her from herself. Yeah, I read this pretty quickly actually. I really enjoyed this one. This was one that I really flew through. Sometimes I really struggle with the historical Regency ones because they're a little bit dry. Dare I use that word with a Mills and Boon? Because obviously with them being historical, obviously romance in historical times was a lot more sedated, shall we say, and not quite so passionate. But I really enjoyed this one. It was really good. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 3 stars. The next book I read was Assassination Classroom. This was number 4, and my notes for this one say, we see Koro Sensei's weaknesses a bit more and how the Class E students actually care for him despite having to assassinate him. Yes, in this one, we see Koro Sensei, the alien who's threatening to blow up the world, a little bit vulnerable. Like, obviously the high authorities are sending assassins to go and assassinate him because the Class 3E are not doing it quick enough. And there's one person that is sent that gets very close. However, obviously there are a lot more books in this series, so I kind of knew that everything was going to be okay. I really liked at the end there was a baseball match and Koro Sensei helps to teach Class 3E how to beat the best team at baseball. But yeah, I really like the moral messages that I'm getting through this series. I didn't expect that. It also got 3 stars for me. These are enjoyable, but they're not, each one is not memorable. And although I enjoy my time and I'm continuing the series, I feel like, I don't know, I never get that 4-star vibe from them, but I do enjoy them. So yeah, it is what it is. The next book I read was Before We Met by Lucy Whitehouse. I actually listened to the audiobook of this, which I think might have been read by Lucy Whitehouse's sister because it was narrated by Polly Whitehouse on Scribd. So I don't know, sisters? I don't know. But anyway, my notes for this say, a domestic thriller, but what's this? I enjoyed it. Predictable ending, but still good. Yeah, this one, to be honest, do you know what? My awful memory is like, can't even remember what happened. Can't even remember what happened. I know I finished it and I know I gave it 3 stars, but I can't remember what happened. How awful is that? Yeah, my review is I can't remember. It wasn't memorable, but I also have a really bad memory, so the two don't combine very well. And I read this right at the beginning of March. You know, it was a long time ago. The next book, I DNF'd the next book I started to read, which was Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney, and it was narrated by Stephanie Racine and Richard Armitage. This was another domestic thriller that I didn't enjoy. This was also on Scribd, I believe. And yeah, it was one of those domestic thrillers where they should never have got married, or they should just get a divorce. Yeah, it was about a couple who were going away to a weekend retreat in this refurbished church. She'd won the prize in a raffle, and they were journeying to the church, and he had forgotten his phone, but actually he hadn't forgotten his phone. She had put it back in the house after he put it in the car, because she didn't want him to have his phone for the weekend, because she wanted them to take the time to really spend time together, not him on his phone all the time. And it was just, I was like, oh, just take a break. Just take a break from each other, you know. And the synopsis was, one of them won't be coming home. And I just thought, I don't care. I was listening to it, and I was like, and it was narrated by a man and a woman, because you were getting the two viewpoints. You were getting the wife's viewpoint, then you were getting the husband's viewpoint. The husband knew the wife was doing this, and the wife knew the husband was doing. And I was just like, I don't care. I really don't. Like, just, if it's not working, it's not working. Take a break from each other. Don't force it. You know, I mean, I know, I can understand. Okay. I know that when a marriage isn't working anymore and it's starting to break down, you do whatever you can to fix it. And I get that. I just don't want to read about it. I don't. So yeah, I DNF'd Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney. The next book I didn't DNF. I read, like everybody else, House of Sky and Breath by Sarah J Maas, the second book in the Crescent City series that she's writing. Big chonker. Oh, by the way, my Rock, Paper, Scissors note said, should have read the synopsis. I don't like domestic thrillers, and definitely not marriage issues thrillers. So yeah, that was the case. Although I did enjoy Before We Met, and that was a domestic thriller, and that was a marriage thing as well. So I don't know. It's just, it is what it is. Okay, so House of Sky and Breath, smut, and more smut. I loved it. Good, interesting plot too, but sometimes a little too convenient. There was one thing that happened, and I was like, but you've just spent the whole book, like, not knowing that. Anyway, jaw-dropping ending, interested to know what happens next. Jaw-dropping ending. Again, my memory fails me. But yeah, look, a lot of people don't like this one as much as the first book, because there was, it's like Sarah J Maas went, I see you, House of Earth and Blood, and I raise you, because the smut in this it just kept coming. Pardon the pun. I'm sorry. That's what she said. But you know, it was just one massive porn fest. It's basically a porno in a fantasy world. That's really, really what this is. So if you do not like explicit sex scenes, don't read the Crescent City novels, because she amped it up. Sarah J Maas just amped it up for this one. There is a plot, and it's a good plot, and I liked it. The plot wasn't as good as the first one, the first book, I'll admit, but the smut was better. What does that say about me? 5 stars. I don't even need to look at my book. 5 stars. It was awesome. It was brilliant. The next book, I actually didn't have this on my TBR, but I swapped it out for another book that was on my TBR. The prompt was to read a poetry book, and I picked out Please Mrs. Butler, but I didn't want to read that. So I read instead Old Possum's Book of Practical Cats by T.S. Eliot and Axel Scheffler. So this is basically the poetry book from the musical Cats, or Cats was based off the poems in this book. Not this particular edition, but T.S. Eliot's Practical Cats poetry. There is some awesome artwork in here. Absolutely stunning artwork. Axel Scheffler was the artist, I believe. I couldn't help singing along to some of these. There are some poems in here that are not in the musical Cats, but the ones that were, I sang them. I just fancied singing, so I did. I gave this 3 stars, and my notes, let's have a look. Can't help singing the poems. Want to watch the musical again now? Pretty much. That's what I just said. The next book I read was The Appeal by Janice Hallett. This one got 3 stars as well. My notes say, written in the format of emails and text messages, you read the story of the Amateur Dramatic Society. Interesting and definitely more intriguing than a normal thriller. Yeah, I think definitely the format and the way that this was written was definitely pulling me forward in the story. It's a very difficult one to read if you're not used to that kind of format, because it is just emails from one person to another, and through that email you're getting the gist of what's happening in the story. But if you like details and descriptions and things like that, you might not enjoy this one. I think because I'm used to reading scripts when I was at college and things like that, I'm used to seeing a story told in that sort of way. And so, yeah, I think if this was written traditionally, I might not have got through it. But because it was written in this really interesting format, and I was trying to work out, who was murdered, because you don't find out until you're literally 2/3 of the way through. You don't know there isn't a murder until 2/3 of the way through. But I was beginning to like piece together certain characteristics. There was definitely a couple of twists in there that I didn't expect. But yeah, I enjoyed it, but it was a 3 stars. So yeah, 1 murder, 15 suspects. Can you uncover the truth? I did not. But hey, it was interesting. The next book I read was Arabian Nights. This is the Bath Treasury of children's classics. But it says, similar to Aesop's Fables or Hans Christian Andersen tales, but in an Arabic setting. Interesting to read the original Aladdin and Sinbad stories. So yeah, of course, like I know like the Disney version of Aladdin, and I know some of the Sinbad story, but this told them in a more traditional format. And actually Aladdin is pretty gruesome. So yeah, I did feel like this was like the Arabic version of Aesop's Fables or Hans Christian Andersen's tales, because there was a lot of morals to the stories. These, however, were a little bit more gruesome. There were people having their hands chopped off, beaten with stones. There was all sorts happening. I'm going to keep this copy because it's stunning. But I doubt I'll ever want to reread these. I read them once and I'm not too fussed about rereading them. I gave them 3 stars. The next book, I ended up buddy reading this with Charlotte. We were in the middle of buddy reading the Graceling series. However, because the next book that we were due to read in March was Bitter Blue, and it was a 500-page book, and Bookgammon had already given me 24 books on my TBR to read, we decided that we would leave Bitter Blue for another month. So she got the X-Hex for her birthday, so I suggested that maybe we could buddy read it together, seeing as it was already on my Bookgammon TBR. So we did. We buddy read this together. This is written by Erin Sterling. I gave it 2 stars. I had such high hopes for this. I really did. My notes say, only redeemable feature is the witchy element. The sex scenes were too vanilla. Am I ruined by Sarah J Maas? And too predictable. Yeah. I'm not a contemporary reader. I don't read contemporaries very often. I don't enjoy them very often. A bit like domestic thrillers, they're just not my thing. So please don't let the fact that I gave this 2 stars be any sort of indication to you whether you would enjoy this or not, because I don't enjoy contemporaries very often. So the fact that I finished it at least gives it some sort of, hey, this was actually okay. But yeah, I was reading the sex scenes in this, and I was just like, they're a bit vanilla. To be fair, I did finish this not long after I'd finished House of Sky and Breath. So when you compare the two, this was extremely vanilla and House of Sky and Breath was all the flavours. Chocolate. I enjoyed the witchy element of this contemporary, but it was kind of predictable. It was very predictable. And it started off, I'd say the first half of it, I was like, this is going to be a 3-star, it's fine. And then the further and further along I just started eye rolling. And the moment I start eye rolling, I know it's dropping a star. So yeah, 2 stars for this, but please do not let that put you off reading it. If you enjoy contemporaries, it's probably a 4-star for you. Double whatever star rating I gave it, because if you enjoy contemporaries, you'll probably enjoy this one. Because it was funny at times. I laughed out loud at one point. So, I mean, yeah, just I don't enjoy contemporaries. The next book I read was the graphic novel of Jane Eyre. This is one of those classical comics. You know, I love and rave about these all the time. The beautiful matte cover of this is absolutely stunning. Can you see that in amongst my ring light? But the artwork in this is just phenomenal. Let me find you a really good page. So the artwork was absolutely beautiful. Notes for this says, easy to follow storyline, great artwork, just love these books. And that's pretty much what it is. They're really great for if you feel like getting into classics but you're a bit intimidated by them. Pick up the classical comics versions, because then you get the classic but in a much easier format to digest. The next book I read was Julia and the Shark with Tom DeFreston. This is a beautiful story. I thought this was a graphic novel. No. A beautiful story that really pulled at my heartstrings. It does deal with mental health. Trigger warnings for bipolar disorder. I don't know if that's a trigger warning, but it does deal with bipolar disorder. And yeah, I really liked the imagery that this book gave me, not just in the pictures, but in the words used. I do enjoy Kira Millward Hargrave's writing. I read most of her books. I think there's only one of her books that I haven't read. No, 2 of her books that I haven't read. and I do love her storytelling. I gave this one 4 stars, and my notes say trigger warning for the bipolar disorder and bullying. Beautifully told, amazing artwork, an important story for children to help understand parents' illnesses. So yes, I know a lot of stories deal with you know, the main character being ill or poorly and having to deal with that. But this one deals with a child having to cope or learn to live with a parent's illness. And I thought that was really, really interesting and really, really important. I would have liked for my children to have read this before I became ill, because maybe this might have helped them to understand what was happening to me, because I wasn't capable of telling them. I wasn't capable of explaining to them what was happening. And I really wish that they'd had something like this to read before I had my mental breakdown. It might have helped them to understand and to deal with it a little bit better. So yeah, I think this book should be in every school so that children have a chance to learn that sometimes parents are not indestructible and sometimes parents are vulnerable as well. So yeah, highly recommend if you have young children to pick this up and read it with them, you know, share it with them and talk about it with them. And yeah, I just really, really enjoyed it. The next book I read, did it. I finally finished it. And I am so glad that I gave this a second chance. This is Witches Steeped in Gold by Shannon Smart. And this was the Fairy Loot copy. I had previously tried to read this, got about a third of the way through and just couldn't get on with it. Just couldn't get into it, couldn't take it in. I was getting so confused and so lost. The story was all over the place. I didn't know what was happening. But I put it back on my shelves because it was a Fairy Loot edition. I didn't want to get rid of it. But I reread it again in the month of March. I started from the beginning because I felt like I was so lost the first time I tried to read it. I thought that by starting again from the beginning would give me that second chance to try and understand it and get into it. And it worked. I really, really enjoyed this. I gave this 4 stars, and my notes on this say, glad I gave it a second try, really enjoyed the scheming and the plot twists. Kind of annoying that the sequel is out in June, but only in paperback, or buying the Fairy Loot special edition for £20+ plus postage and packaging. Yeah, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to pay £20+ for the special edition for this. But when I looked for the sequel, I could only find it coming out in paperback in the UK. So I'm kind of miffed. I'm kind of annoyed that yes, I have this beautiful edition of Witches Steeped in Gold, but now I can't get the matching set. I kind of wish that we were given, like, I like having the beautiful editions that Fairy Loot sent out to us, but this is so different that unless I pay the Fairy Loot special edition price, I'm never going to get a copy to match this, the second copy, the second book to match this. Whereas if we were sent the original sort of cover but with sprayed edges or something, then I might have been able to get them to match, but now I won't, and that's going to annoy me because now I have this edition and then whatever edition I can find for the second book, be it in paperback, or I might be able to get the hardback, I don't know, but I'm not going to be able to get the special edition for the second one, and that kind of frustrates me. So I may end up like selling this one, or unhauling it in some way, donating it somewhere, if a friend of mine wants to read it, and then just go out and buy the normal copy, so it matches, because I am that person. I am that person. But yeah, 4 stars for this. Really glad I reread it. The next book I read was a contemporary that I did enjoy, and that's because it's a hard-hitting contemporary. Those ones are the ones that I do generally tend to prefer. There's a really good twist in here that I did enjoy. I gave it 3 stars, so that for me is pretty good. Important subject to be discussed in a YA book, just too much teenage angst for me. I need this in an adult format. Yeah, that was a problem that I did have, in that because this was dealing with teenagers at school, and although it was dealing with a hard-hitting subject, we still had teenagers. I need this story in an adult's book, in an adult's contemporary. Then I might enjoy it a lot more. So yeah, I really liked as well the way that this book was set out. I'm not going to go into too much details about that because it is kind of a spoiler, which when I discovered what was happening with the setup, the way the book was written, it was really nice to discover that. So I'm not going to say too much about the way that it was written, but I liked it. I liked it a lot. And I think if you like a hard-hitting contemporary, but you're worried that it's too hard and it's too triggering, I think this would be a good one for you to read. The next book. Oh, people. Oh. I read this book on ebook format, and before I was halfway through, I went and bought the physical copy. I couldn't, this is Dance of a Burning Sea by E.J. Mello. I don't need to look at my reader's journal to know that I gave this 5 stars. I don't even need to look at my notes to tell you that I loved this book. Yes! I loved it. I loved it so much. Let's look at my notes, because at the moment all I want to do is go read it. Pirates. Hate to love trope. Exciting adventures. So glad I've ordered the hard copies. That doesn't even begin to explain how much I love this book. This is the second book in a trilogy. The books 1 and book 2 are already available on Kindle Unlimited. Book 3 is going to be available in February next year. I cannot wait. I really, really need it. Like now. I believe that these books are indie published because it says in the front that they are published by Montlake, which are trademarks of Amazon.com. So I think that these are indie published via Amazon. So you would be helping out an indie published author if you purchase these books. They're only $5.99 on Amazon, and I highly encourage you to pick these up. The series is about 3 sisters. Each book follows one of the sisters. The first book follows Eyre, who is the youngest sister. She has the gift of voice, of her song. So she sings, she can create magic with her voice. This one follows the second sister, the middle sister, called, what was her name? I forgot now. Naya. That's my bad memory. It's not the book. Naya, who has the gift of movement, of dance, of energy. So she can feel energy around her and use that to create magic. Oh, loved it. It's got pirates in it. It's set at sea. It's a hate to love. She's so sassy. He's so broody. I just loved it. I loved it so, so much. Please, please pick this up. If you love a really good, dark fantasy, it's great plot line, really interesting story, really beautiful world building as well. Like the world in my mind is just so astounding and amazing. I loved it. And then in there you have this beautiful romance blossoming that, you know, you just want them to kiss. Like, oh, I loved it so much. And the last line of the book, I'm not going to read it to you, but I will live in my heart forever. It's dark, it's fantasy, it's romance. I loved it. Read it, please read it. Read it, please read it. The first book, as I say, is Song in the Forever Rains, and this one is Dance of a Burning Sea. Gave it 5 stars, loved it. And the last book that I read in March, oh, come here, come on, you know you want to, was the first book in the Lord of the Rings. It is The Fellowship of the Ring by J.R.R. Tolkien. I listened to this on audiobook and I gave this 3 stars. Now, I do love the story of the Lord of the Rings. I love the movies, I loved The Hobbit, and I do love this. I do feel like the movies make the story move faster. This one, J.R.R. Tolkien was building a world, and you get that in his books. When you watch the films, it's more about the storyline, but in the books, it's so much more about the world and the characters. It's so different to the films, and I can understand why a lot of people struggle to get through the books. They're classics. I really enjoyed it. I did. I really enjoyed it. But it does meander quite a lot. So my notes on this say bugger all, because I forgot to write them down. So that was all of the books that I read in March. So let's go to the statistics. So I read a grand total of 14 books. So I didn't finish 24 books, which Bookgammon gave me, unfortunately. The physical pages I read was 3,569. The ebook pages I read, because remember I read Dance of a Burning Sea by ebook, and then bought the physical copy, so the ebook pages count. I read 511 pages on ebook, which is good because that doesn't happen often. The audio hours of books that I own was 33 hours and 37 minutes. Most of that was The Fellowship of the Ring, let's be honest. And I listened to 0 hours of audiobooks that I borrowed. So I didn't borrow any books audibly this month. Ratings, I gave 2 books 5 stars, 2 books 4 stars, 9 books 3 stars, 1 book 2 stars. There was no 1 stars this month, which is always good, but there was 1 DNF. I read 2 thrillers, 3 contemporaries, which is pretty good for me, let's face it, 3 classics, 1 middle grade, 2 graphic novels or mangas, no non-fiction, which is something that I do need to pick up on, and I read 3 fantasy or sci-fis. That's a really good mix. It apart from non-fiction, I read something from every genre, so yeah, or category rather than genres. The Origin, all 14 books were owned by myself, none were borrowed. Although I could say that Dance of a Burning Sea was borrowed. If I'm going to count the e-pages, I should have put 1 was borrowed. But now that I own it, I kind of counted it as owned. Anyway, the format of the way that I read them, I read 11 physically, 2 audibly and 1 e-bookily. The bindings of the books that I read physically, 6 were, or the bindings of the books that I read, 6 were in hardback, 7 were in paperback. The genders, 3 were male, 9 were female, and then 2 were in the other category. Those may be any LGBTQ authors, or if there was more than one author and they were of different genders. So Julia and the Shark went in as other because it was written by Kieran Millwood Hargrave and Tom DeFreston. So because one is male, one is female, I put them in as other. The longest book that I read was, no surprise, House of Sky and Breath by Sarah J. Maas. This had a total of 801 pages. Loved every minute of it. And the shortest book I read was, of course, the poetry book, Old Possum's Book of Practical Cats by T.S. Eliot. This has a total of 64 pages. Still loved every minute of it. The oldest book I read was, of course, Arabian Nights, because these were translated into English, around 1706 to 1721, but they are from the 8th century. So that is the oldest book that I read. The newest, again, was House of Sky and Breath, because that was released in February this year. The highest rated, let me get it again, House of Sky and Breath, which got a Goodreads rating of 4.59 at the time that I created these statistics. That may have changed since. And the least, or the lowest rated, was the Mills and Boon, God bless it, Disgrace and Desire. This had a Goodreads rating of 3.03. Mills and Boon's not read by everybody, and there's so many of them as well that even if you do read Mills and Boon, you may never have picked this one up. So it's no surprise really there. The worst book of the month was, of course, Rock, Paper, Scissors. It always will be my DNF because, well, I DNF'd it, so, you know, it was the worst. And the best book of the month, are we going to be surprised when I reach for Dance of the Burning Sea by E.J. Mello. This was my book of the month. Hold the phone. This is the best book of the year so far. That's how much I love this book. This book is a contender for book of the year. I have not read anything else this year so far that has got me so excited, so enthralled, so into the story. Like, I am burning for the third book. Burning. I need it in my life so badly. I had to buy the physical copies of book 1 and book 2 because I knew that before book 3 is released, I'm going to want to reread these, and I couldn't guarantee that Kindle Unlimited would still have them available. So I had to buy the physical copies. I need to read these books again before the third book comes out. Not because I'm going to need to remember what happened, because I doubt I'll ever forget, but because I just enjoyed the story so much. So yeah, that is it. That is my best book of March. Please pick it up. Please read it. Obviously, you'll have to read the first book first, which I gave 4 stars in the month of February. So yeah, that is that. I hope you enjoyed this wrap up. If you did, please like, comment and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.